This is our, I don't know, fifth or sixth year of doing meetups. We started during COVID. And at first it was like a panic attack. Like we just wanted to reassure each other that we were all alive and well. And it's really evolved into an educational forum to showcase the expertise of members in the Slow Flowers movement all across North America and on topics that are timely and sometimes they're business oriented, sometimes they're creatively oriented. And today it's a little bit of both. And I just am thrilled to welcome Kate Punnett of the August Press, who's from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Hi, Kate.
Hi there. Hi,
It,
everyone.
it's really great to have you here. And Kate is an urban flower farmer turned floral artist, and she has a new term called the pressed florist, which I love so much. So, Kate, I know that you are dedicated to sustainability, and you craft custom pressed floral art, greeting cards, fine art from the flowers that you grow. Um, but you're really taking this up to the next level. For your flower growing, your art, and really a new chapter for your business. So I'm thrilled that we're going to hear from you. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself while I pull up the PowerPoint, okay?
Great. Hi,
Good.
everyone. So yeah, I'm so excited to be surrounded in flowers right now. Our growing season here in Ottawa is over. My last dahlias in the garden froze a couple weeks ago. I still need to dig out the tubers. But the snow is on the way here, and I visited the floral supply shop this morning and got as many flowers as I could. And it just feels so great to talk to everyone about my favorite thing, flowers. I used to run a sustainable floral studio in my home in Ottawa. I have a little shed in the back, and I basically ripped up all of my lawn and started to grow flowers right when the local flower movement hit this city. So I started off selling small bouquets and grew and started taking in flowers from local farmers. And one thing after the other, I started doing training, called myself a florist, and had a little business. I homeschool my three kids, so things got really hectic, as it does in floristry. There was a lot of pressures on me that started to mount up. Vase life, conditions, orders, and it didn't really align to the plan that I had originally with my business. So I took a big step back and I slowly started to press flowers in my studio instead. And one season a few years ago, I decided to start with the tulips and end with the dahlias and press every single flower that grew locally from our local flower farms and from my own big gardens, and get to really understand how a flower acts when it is in a pressed dehydrated form. And I got really into it. So I have a background in food science, and I'm very into process, and I was very interested in it. And then I started to make prints, and it just one thing after another. And then, as it does, my Instagram, because I started following it, my Instagram blew up with all these pressed flower artists, and I started connecting across the world, really, with different flower artists. Like, what a wonderful community there is of people sharing information and tips, and just really open and community oriented. And I just fell in love. So I'm excited to talk today about the art and the business side of pressing flowers. And I'm going to go through a few slides at the beginning just to give you some context of me and my space and the type of things I create, the type of tools I use. And then after that, I have all these beautiful flowers that we are going to press together, and I'll show you some hands-on techniques. Lucky for the situation that I was in, having understood so much about sustainable floristry, in that I have such close relationships with our local farmers right from the beginning. So a lot of my flowers are delivered to my home as fresh as possible. These roses were just picked and just pressed, and they turned out beautifully. This is my homemade flower presses that I started to make because I found that there was not really any flower presses that could do what I really wanted them to do on the market. So as it goes, you make your own, and then people start to want to buy them. And anyway, so this is my super fresh roses in various states, and you'll see that as we talk. There's, you have a flower, and you have a book, and you have a flower, and you put the flower in the book, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But when you get to more advanced techniques, you start to understand that flowers sometimes need to be foliage needs to be minimized. Things need to be put on an angle. Things need to be deconstructed to be reconstructed later. So this is a really great snapshot of a flower press. And so I just, as my bio is going, this is kind of how I started, snapdragons, tiny little seeds at the beginning of the season. This is how I used to spend my early springs. This is how kind of things progressed for me in the local flower world. This is kind of my little setup. I had someone come in and take pictures one day, and this is kind of going back to my bio, so we can switch ahead. I love this picture. This is one of my flower prints that I got that I created, and I made it really, really big. And you can see it here. I put it behind me as well. It's become my wallpaper. This is a scissor press. So as I show you the press that I'm using today, this is one of the tools that I use. I made this, I invented this basically. You can go back. If anyone follows me on Instagram, I show this quite a lot because I'm proud of it. Because I really struggled learning how to press more difficult flowers like, sunflowers, and we'll talk about that later. And I created this 2-ton scissor press with aluminum sheets and thick plywood to put an immense amount of pressure on my flowers. And the idea of pressure is actually quite big, and it's also a little bit controversial in the flower press world. Some flower press artists do not use a lot of pressure, and some do. And if you see a lot of pressed flower art, you can tell the difference. Some petals are more wavy, and some flowers have a more wavy feeling to them. They're still dry, they're still frameable or craftable. But for me, my goal has always been to create the flattest possible flower. And so this scissor press with its intense pressure has done the trick for me. And here we have some beautiful spring garden flowers on top of my felt layer. I'll show you with this press the different layers, but that's a great example of how I use felt and chipboard, and there's paper towel, a bamboo towel under that. So there's a lot of techniques in the layering of each individual flower. And as we know, these blossoms that I've taken off the main stem are so moist. And so the reason that I've chosen the felt here, and this is just 100% wool craft felt, is because it absorbs the moisture way better than anything. And these beautiful blue flowers tend to be the most beautiful in color retention. This is my favorite press that I have made. I do not sell this size of press, but this is a great photo to show you how I go about making all my presses. So all of my presses are an element of one sheet of paper. So my large professional press that I sell across North America is exactly one sheet of paper. So it makes it really easy to buy different layers or to cut layers because it's all the same. And then the presses that I make at home for more commercial uses, I don't know if it's commercial, it's artful uses, are either a side of paper beside each other or the other way around.
So this is about, what is the size of this sheet of paper you're showing
That's
here?
an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So these are my dimensions for everything. And there's a nice, some edible flowers for a cake that somebody commissioned from me. So a nice little stack on their way to a cake maker. This slide to illustrate that not all flowers are pressable. These tulips we have in Canada, because I live in the capital of Canada, we have the Tulip Festival, which is a big deal. And I was trying to create something for that And I have yet to really be able to press a tulip very well. And it's interesting if you start to, I don't know, the audience, I'm sure your growers, florists, art makers, crafters, all the different, slow flower people here have understand that the spring flowers are moist.
Mm.
And it's interesting, like I've done so many arrangements and I've done so much work as a florist with spring flowers, but I never realized how moist everything was in the spring. And these tulips are almost like a sponge, like a mini sponge, each petal. And we know that from the way they bruise if you step on them is very unique, and that's because they have hold so much moisture. So yeah, so these are one of my, maybe next year I'll teach you all how I finally learned to press a tulip, but this is my big goal. Some of these worked out. I would say 10% of these pressed well. The print behind me actually is a project I did with my neighborhood, and these are, ideas for business and community type of art that you can do. I got all my neighbors to drop off flowers from their gardens. I had some bins out my front yard, and slowly my kids and I watched out the window as they filled these bins with flowers. And I would take them to the back and I pressed them all. And then I created this print with it for my neighborhood, and we used it as a fundraiser for something in our area. So yeah, it has a very special meaning to me, that the entire process and the connections made from this very old art form.
It's so place and season based, Kate. And that's what I love about it, that
Isn't it? Yeah,
connection you're making.
yeah. And that's just a 2D of the flowers.
Mm, love it.
So as I started making flower art, I originally just kind of looked at everything like a bouquet and would put things together in the similar ways that you create a bouquet. Your like your line, your focal flower, your small bits, your foliage. But really, I'm always been really inspired by the arts and crafts movement, and I started to lately, my work has started to be a bit more influenced by wallpaper and more pattern-based art. And this is just an example of one of the pieces I made with that. And yeah, this is another one. This is definitely a spring piece. These are my long tweezers that I use. I buy them from Amazon, and I buy a lot of them because I lose my tweezers like I lose my glasses. And so I always have a lot on hand. And long edged with the side angle of the tweezers are definitely one of my must-haves for pressed flower art. And this is a piece that I made for my mom when she was sick last year. So just some more sentimentality. And then the next slide will show you how my photographer was able to put this into a flat image. It's a very interesting process. Yeah, turning things that are 3D and then you flatten them and having them go um, to a photographer and get them digitally reproduced. I'd like you to notice as we talk later about layers, the pink rose on the top, you can see the darker pink rose on the top, it's fuchsia. And if you notice, you can see a line through it, a subtle line striping. And I just want you to notice that, because as I talk about layers, these are the imprints, depending on what layer you use when you press flowers, you will get that imprint of the layer onto your flower. And I no longer use that layer that caused that striping. This is one of my older prints, but it's good to notice it.
Hmm.
Yeah, and here's it's on its side, but here is my printer. There's an artist run co-op that does my printing in town, so this is it kind of folded up, and pretty exciting, to create something, especially in this age of digitally reproduced everything or digitally created everything actually. And to say like that, I grew that flower, my neighbor grew that flower, the farmer in my area grew that, and now it's rolled up, and it's just the most magnificent thing. It's here forever.
Mm, love it.
This is a recent print that I made, a sunflower print, and it is pretty epic to be able to get a sunflower to smush that flat. And if you follow pressed flower artists, there's a lot of guides. You can even buy a guide to teach you how to press it that flat. I never bought one. I just figured it out by making a machine that did it, and that's my scissor press. So I'll deconstruct a sunflower for you later, and I'll show you how I got it that flat.
Wow.
Yeah, that's just another piece. In terms of the business side, most recently I have this piece going onto t-shirts, and I'll be selling them at a local market. Everybody tends to really like this piece. It has a lot of sentimentality to me. My mom-in-law, who's no longer here, planted that rose of Sharon. You know, every flower in here has a piece of importance, and now I get to put it on a t-shirt. These are my glass on glass pieces. It's a little fuzzy with the way I blew it up, but this is another way you can go with your business. These are a hit at the market, um, especially in the winter. I did one the other week, and just not having flowers anymore around us, but being able to be around a table full of these is it's a delight. I felt delight in people who came by my market stand, and what could you want more than that when you love flowers yourself? I spent a lot of time waiting to um, take in commissions from brides. I really wanted to be sure that I knew how to press every single flower I possibly could, that I knew when it was done, that I knew how to properly frame it, that I knew the type of glass, the type of frame to choose. I really went deep into that. I think you could probably, start pressing flowers and take commissions in right away. It's such a popular thing to do right now. And I mean, in terms of sustainability, it really rounds that circle out of what to do with the flowers after, especially for the bride who's really chosen flowers locally for a reason. Um, for me, I spend a lot of time because I really know how, working with flowers for so long, the energy contained in all of these flowers and how important they are to the person commissioning me. So I've just recently started taking commissions, and this is a bridal bouquet that I pressed. Another kind of business venture is these are from a funeral.
Mm.
So somebody passed away, and I went and took the flowers, a snippet of the flowers from the funeral, and I pressed them. And two sisters of the mother got these frames. And this is my studio where I am not right now because it's too cold. But yeah, so just a showing you of the beauty of the glass on glass type of technique with flowers, and hoping, that I'm able to capture the essence of this couple who got married, and she once held these flowers and now she can put them on her wall.
I love it. Even on a dreary day, they're just
Yeah.
glowing. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so that's it. That's my last slide. A little snapshot of, where I came from and where I'm growing to. And yeah.
Wonderful. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for that teaser to get us all thinking about how can we get in on this?
Yeah, I'll show you some techniques and a bunch of tools, and we'll see where we get to. It's great, and I'll take any questions after. I'm an open book. I know this the pressed flower niche has become a niche, and it's kind of exploding. And I've been so blessed with all of the knowledge of these. How many DMs have I given to, what kind of glue do you use? What are those tweezers? What kind of frame is that? Just constantly asking and always getting responses. And so I'm the same way. If you have any questions now or even after, you're welcome to ask me on Instagram. I have a whole bunch of different flowers, and I tend to go about pressing somebody's bouquet or, a big bucket of flowers the same way that I used to go about building a bouquet. Um, there are different categories of flowers. Like as I said before, like you have your line flowers, you have your focal flowers, you have your open flowers, you have your tiny Either it's like a foliage, or, for me, I used to, when I made bouquets, I used to use small flowers as my foliage. I didn't use a lot of foliage. And then there's a different technique for pressing all of these. So let's kind of break it down, because I think that's one of the biggest questions that I'm asked, and it takes the most amount of time to figure this out. And if you are thinking about, if you already have a floral business, whether you're a farmer or a florist or whatnot, and you're thinking about adding this on as a winter, something to do in the winter, when you're not growing, or something to do for offer your brides that already purchased from you year round. The one thing I would say is that, just like gardening and just like creating bouquets and arrangements, there's so much memory that happens in your hands and in your head and in your heart. So when I now press a flower, I just know. I see a flower and I know right away how to press it. I feel its energy. I know if it's fresh. I know where it goes. I know the angle it is in. And whoever is pressing in your business, if it's your own, if it's you, if you wanted to then have somebody else do that for you, it would be a lot of knowledge that you would have to give that other person. So just to keep that in mind. I mean, it's very simple to press a cosmo or a wildflower or some chamomile. But if you're actually taking in a complex arrangement, and that bride is really wanting that orchid to stay white, because that orchid, this is my own experience the other week, that orchid was the whole reason she chose white for her wedding, because it was the national flower of her country. You have to know how to press that orchid, and anyway, so I just been thinking a lot about that. And I always add in the heart, because what we're doing here is we're taking something fresh and we're transforming it. And it's not just about squeezing the moisture out of it and letting it go. It's actually about keeping the essence of the aliveness of what it used to be and transforming it into something else. So anyway,
Hmm.
here is my larger press that I was mentioning before. The one I had shown you on the pictures, they were lined up. It was lined up like this. This one is lined like this. No big, it's not a big deal, but it's actually, if you're going to, buy a sheet of plywood and create something, it's just a good thing to know right off the bat. It'll make your life easier. Um, I use an 18 mil, which is a 3/4 inch plywood. I use Baltic birch. I do not use hardwood. Plywood has all of the layers that make it stronger. And the whole reason I started making presses is that I wanted a press I could stand on. So you realize when you close up a press, you are only able to basically push it as much, the top as much as you can, or to lean on it as much as you can. But to actually get a press on the floor and step on it is a whole other level of pressure. And I couldn't find one that I could actually just step on or have my kids step on while I tightened the wing nuts. So that's why I went big and created my Pro Press and make these themselves myself. These are threaded rod that are hacksawed to a specific length. And I have my presses nice and tall because I tend to put a ton of layers in them. And I separate those layers by other pieces of plywood in the middle. And that's just because the way I organize. Everyone organizes things differently. And basically what you're doing is you're packing away your flowers into these portable little, like press machines. And so you have to know, where is this, where is that? And so you come up with a structure that is, and you've probably seen pictures of people's workshops on Instagram with tons of presses and different labels. And anyway, this is how I do it. My favorite layers are printer paper. So I use stacks and stacks of paper. So this is only to get my press higher so that you can see I don't actually use this, this much paper for one flower. That would be crazy. But I do use a nice chunk of it, maybe, 20 sheets or so. You can hear what 20 sheets sounds like. It's different than 2. And I will put that down first. And all of this paper, I would say about 95% of my paper is reused. So I have tons right now because I'm not pressing much right now. I have tons of used paper just sitting, waiting for the next time I use it. So even the tools I use are mostly reused. I'll throw out any paper that has mold, moisture, or a bit of pollen. Some of the flowers put their pollen into the paper, and then that can then press into another flower. So I will recycle those. My next favorite layer is chipboard. Going back to that fuchsia rose I showed you a while ago, that is the result of cardboard. Cardboard has a corrugation to it, and for my own use, because I am pressing under extreme pressure, I don't know, extreme is like my body weight, but you know, or two of my kids' body weight, but I'm not pressing slowly and too slowly, and I'm not pressing just with my hands. So anything that is in my press is going to take the whatever the layer is made of. And so chipboard is basically like cardboard without the air in it. So it's actually just better all around. It's also very cheap to buy sheets of it. And again, I buy boxes of sheets that are the same size as my paper. So it's just like done. And then I will stack, you know, maybe a few sheets of chipboard on. So I've done my paper and I've done my chipboard, and now I put my paper on top. So this is the nice feeling of a fresh palette to start with. So let's dig into the flowers. I will start with, let's start with these. The tiny, tiny flowers are really what makes my pieces what they are. And it's because you can't build something that if you are creating a small piece of art, perspective wise, you need a lot of tiny flowers to feel like you have a lot of texture on a small piece. Otherwise, you can only have like 3 dahlias or something, you know, 4 cosmos and some ferns, and you'd be done. So you need a lot of small perspective in order to do a smaller piece. I have an example here of that black piece that I showed you the print of that I'm getting on shirts. Most of my pieces are done 16 by 20. These are actually the flowers. This is the original. And you can see that I actually had to make this quite large. This is not 16 by 20. It's almost double that. And the reason why is I really wanted to feature the flowers that were on here. And because I wanted so many of them in the larger size, I had to build it on a larger palette, on a larger canvas, just to show you. So yeah, so little flowers are what I mostly spend my time pressing. And I use floral snips for them because even just the exercise of having flower scissors and having to go back and forth causes pain in my hands. So having them retractable really helps. And so I'll just try to snip these off. Oh, these ones are kind of... So the reason why I chose these as opposed to the chamomile is that these types of flowers, when you press them, you cannot press just the bloom on that, because you'll notice that, and if anyone knows plant biology better than I do, the way that they are all attached to the base makes it so that if you go too close to where, you know, I want to press that flat, I can't, because it's gonna all, if I cut it there, it's all gonna come into pieces. Whereas a flower like chamomile or feverfew, you can cut it right down, or like a forget-me-not, you can cut it right down to the base, and it's going to keep that entire flower. So these are just little nuances about each flower and how you get to know them right away. So for these flowers in particular, I'm going to press them all on their side. So these will be a side view of the flower. And what I love about floral art is when you have, for me, it's like walking in a garden. So when you see a garden, you don't always see, you know, you're not always, let me just cut this sunflower off. You're not looking always at this, right? You're looking at this or this. You're not always face down, and it's really important for me to capture that. It's almost like you want to be walking in a garden, have all the different stages of the flower in its development, but also the way it goes. You know, some flowers tend to droop. Like I absolutely love these chamomile, you know, that is drooping to its side, if you can see that. So I'm not going to press this entire bunch of flowers all just flat, because that's not what I see in nature. I'll take this and I will press it as well, some of these on their side. And that gives that garden natural feeling in your work when you start to really look at how they behave in your garden, how they act in the vase, and just really respect that when you're pressing it. So we'll get to the sunflower in the end, because that's like the big moment, right? You know, I will sit here, you know, I also pay my girls to, especially with the hydrangea, because that can take hours and hours to press. And I'll just, you know, you just sit here and you just cut them. Just sit like this whole bouquet will probably take me about 2-3 hours, maybe 2 hours to go into little stems and to press it all. So it's quite labor intensive, which is something else that you don't think about. I think I didn't think about. And so, yeah, and for me, it's like I want to press every single one. So, okay, so let's move on to snapdragons. Like, so a more line type flower. It is rare that I would be able to, actually, you just can't. You cannot press this like this. If I do see a pressed snapdragon in a piece of art, I pretty much know it's been deconstructed and then reconstructed again. So this is a decision that you have to make about something like this. Now, what I'll be doing is taking off each little flower and pressing it separately. But even more than that, I mean, let's get really into this and start looking at every flower. These green little caps end up, when you press it, end up not pressing as beautifully as you think. So even to the point I've learned that taking that cap off and pressing it without it just makes a more beautiful flower. Every element that is included in a flower has its own reaction when it's been under pressure over time. And there are some flowers, I don't know if I have an example here, whose middle alone will, and it happens sometimes in roses actually, not these ones here, but the middle, there's a reaction in the middle of the flower that will cause a reaction in the petals. It happens sometimes in dahlias, actually, these white dahlias that I grew from Floret that were all in my garden this year. The middle was so yellow, and when it pressed, it kind of yellowed the white petals. So this is another thing you start to learn, that sometimes flowers need to be deconstructed and then reconstructed later. But for me, it's about trying to minimize the amount of work after I press it, because it can get so tedious. And so you know, just like all your best practices that you've established through gardening or floristry or whatnot, you're starting to develop them as you have each flower. And I mean, bonus if you already know a lot about flowers. That's kind of how I see, like it's was never a waste of time that I spent so long in floristry, because I know these flowers so well. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to take off all of these. And depending on how they press, I might be able to reconstruct it. I might, but the stem, and you'll notice this, you probably know this yourselves from dealing with these types of flowers that kind of broke off, but the stems here are really, really moist. They're thick and they're moist, and not all stem is like that, like the feverfew or the chamomile. This is a perfect stem to press. Just a line, just creates a nice flat line. This is going to create a moldy mess, but it's also going to press at a different height than these soft petals. So you need a lot of pressure to make this really beautiful. These, not as much. So I won't put on the same layer. I will never put two different types of flower, or not two different types of flower, but two different needs of a flower to press on the same layer, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
or two different thicknesses.
two different thicknesses,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and I won't, so even though this is the same flower, you think, okay, there's my snapdragon, like it looks beautiful, right? Well, it's not, that's not going to work. It could look pretty for the picture, but it's never going to work. So what's going to happen is this could go moldy and make the other flowers moldy, or this could take a long time to get flat, making these never really in contact with the layer above. And that's when you get wrinkled petals. So I just notice also, if you wanted to attempt to do the whole thing, which, depending on your variety of snapdragon, which is a whole other thing, if there's a lot of growers watching this, I went from growing, double click, double, give me everything double, give me everything without a center, like all my dahlias, nothing had a center, all my cosmos, I give me the seashell side, like everything was luxurious. And that's what I loved. But now it's like I'm going through the seed catalog trying to find everything that's a single. Give me the most pared down variety of that flower, because I know I'll have way better success pressing it. And if you think about it, like a butterfly ranunculus, if you know your ranunculus, a butterfly ranunculus compared to an Italian ranunculus, the butterflies have a middle and they will press like a ranunculus. When you see it later, you might think it's maybe something else, but it's pretty much a ranunculus. A more ruffled ranunculus pressed looks a lot like a frilly Cosmo or a little dahlia or a really ruffled rose. You can't really distinguish between what type of flower that is. And for me, commissions is one thing, but for art is another thing. So I'm trying to get as much variety of what's growing in the season at once. So it comes amazingly down to seed collection, right? A seed choice in your catalog, or seed saving. The zinnias that have the most discrete petal formations will press beautifully, but a lot of zinnias, there's just so much overlapping of the petals. It's just a mess in the press. I know when the flowers are in your hands and you're trying to figure these things out, these are the things I wish that someone had just told me, and I had to learn them. So I'm excited to share them with you. I probably could have cut down on like a year of experimenting if someone had told me all this one day. So I hope you don't mind that I'm getting so detailed.
No, I think people really appreciate it. It's so interesting to just looking at the print behind you. It's very easy to see the sort of embodiment of some of these lessons you've just shared, like the the sort of composite flowers where there is a center do seem to press beautifully.
They do. Yeah. And so let me just show you though, I think we just have a couple more minutes, but I want to get on to a more complicated flower. But I will just quickly say, foliage, very, very easy. This is already dry. It's like a wildflower. Wildflowers are made to just they're wild and they're fine because they're indestructible and they press really well as well. But if you're into pressing foliage, for me, I'm going to do, the whole thing I would do if I was putting this in a vase, and I would press it like that. And these are a big part of my pieces now. So easy to press. And then I'll show you the biggest issue of the flower presser is the white flower. So if we talk about color retention, colors will change in the press depending on how they started. And it's not just how they started. I mean, we all know like there's different shades of white in flowers. I know that from ordering flowers for different bouquets. Is it a creamier white? Is a whiter white? A whiter white flower like this will press more white, but more than that, it's the freshness. So the freshest flower pressed quickly under a lot of pressure has the best color retention for me. Longevity wise, certain flowers will lose their color over time more than others. And this is just the truth. And, I thought I was getting away from the vase life world with not doing fresh flowers anymore, but it's still here because we're dealing with nature, and nature still has its own internal clock. So that's important to notice, to talk about with this work. And this is why I do a lot of digitization with my work. So white flowers, that's, there's a whole thing about white flowers, but I'll just touch on it like that. The whiter the white, the fresher it is, and the quicker you can press it, the best. And just really quick, I'll show you so we can get to the questions. I'll show you how I would press this rose. I would never press, I could press it a couple ways. I could press it by, let me just clean that layer off. I could press it petal by petal and just sit and press it petal by petal and then glue it back together after. So that is a deconstruction with a reconstruction. I mean, obviously this is not going to press like this. For me, I get kind of crazy, and I'll also sometimes basically cut the flower in half. I can go press those later, possibly. And I might press, and then I take the middle out of here. So beautiful. You're really getting into the flower, and you're also seeing where all the insects live, and you realize how many people are enjoying this flower other than you as they all scatter around. So yeah, I might press this rose, and I do this often with my roses like this. And I'm not just cutting that in half. As you can see, I debulked it. The least you can't notice if all these petals are behind it when you have in press state. So now I have 4 petals on there. They're all falling off. And I'll press it on the side view, which is really important to me. And my last would be the sunflower. This is a great example of debulking, and I just want to show you quickly. This is a really tough flower. We all know how a sunflower feels. We can go into choosing the right varieties again, which there's some sunflowers that press better than others. But let's just look at this regular one I got, from the floral supply. And I'm actually in order to press this, I'm actually going to debulk the back as much as I can. And that's what I did on that print before. I go in and I actually cut out the back as much as possible. Now, you'll know at a certain point, every flower, like I showed you at the beginning, has a certain point where you can't cut it anymore, where the petals just give up and they just go away. They need something to hold on to. And I know where that is with sunflowers. This will almost be naked behind. And all of a sudden, we went from a very tough sunflower to a soft and malleable one. And you know right away that softness is going to press it way easier than it being that hard disc that it was before. Like a quick tour of the different flowers and how to kind of manipulate everything to make it work.
So incredible. Okay, let's do some quick questions, and then I want to also talk about Kate's new workbook that she's created and make sure everybody knows how to order it. Kelly Jane asks, can you talk about how you keep your colors so bright and vivid? I know you've touched on this a little bit, but do you recommend that people kind of keep really good records so that, they're more familiar with color retention on certain varieties?
My records are in here.
Okay.
So it's the experience of pressing a freshly cut, a very fresh flower, and then pressing a flower that's old, and you'll just see right away. It's very different. I think there's a lot at play with color retention that we don't know yet. I think there is pollination. I think there's time that it's cut. Just like, flowers that I used to, zinnias, I could not keep in the fridge or they would just turn into a moldy mess, how they're stored, and then the amount of pressure and what is in the press at the same time. There are so many variables in color retention. It's not a simple thing for me. And thank you for noticing that about my colors, because it's actually the number one thing that I'm trying to capture, because it's what drew me into to flowers. So
that's really helpful. Okay, Charina says, do you deconstruct the sunflowers fully and press the petals individually.
I
You just
don't do
showed us what you're doing. Yeah.
no. I have done that for a couple very large flowers, very large sunflowers, that I had in a commission, and I really wanted them to work well. If you take the most amount of bulk off your flower and press it really heavily, I have my scissor jack that I use, or I'll have like two of my kids step on this. It's also important to constantly tighten your press. So if you're going to become a high pressure presser like I am, you can't just you can't just tighten it once. You have to then step on it the next day. Sometimes with a sunflower, I'll step on this 3 times a day and to continue because it's going to continue decompressing and pressing down. And you have to catch up with that by adding more pressure because you want it to force it flat.
That's super helpful. Um, Katrina says, do you have a software program or to recommend or a company you recommend for digitizing your work?
No, but I would say, depending on where you live, find a good photographer that is willing to experiment with you and build that relationship.
Mhm.
So that I've gone down that road. It's taken about a year. Now I can bring by a print to him and get it back in amazing quality, but it took a long time because you're dealing with someone that has to photograph something fresh. So I do all my photography other than my digital prints. Um, and it
So
needs to,
you're taking the actual original
yeah,
piece to the photographer.
yeah. And I get it reproduced by him. And it's tricky. Yeah, it's something that you have to figure out on your own and how, I mean, we're talking about shadows here, right? And one of the reasons I'm trying to get the flattest flower possible is I'm trying to minimize the shadows in my digital work.
Mm. hmm That's interesting. And do you have a recommendation on where to purchase chipboard in bulk?
Uline.
Uline. Okay.
I would skip, I mean, you can order it anywhere, but Uline is like cases of.
They sell in bulk for sure. One thing I wanted to comment on is I'm starting to get a good sense of your production cycle. You are it seems like you're just pressing a mass of flowers that are similar, like the chamomile, all on one sheet. And then you'll do roses all on one sheet. Whatever you do, you're creating the raw material for your artwork that you put together later. You're not assembling the pattern on one press.
I'm
Okay.
creating my art medium,
Okay.
I'm making my paint. So,
Yeah.
so it looks like usually other than my garden, which has been very neglected the past couple of years because of this, it's usually me ordering buckets of flowers in from farmers and seeing what's available that week, getting them in, racing home and mass pressing them all.
Okay. So what is your a day in the life of Kate Punnett look like?
I should know. Well, I homeschool my kids, so I started this because I've really committed to staying home and building a slow business for when they are launched. And yeah, so this is my kitchen. We're on my kitchen table right now.
Yeah. And so you gather all the freshest flowers available. You spend a couple hours deconstructing them, laying them on the press, getting the paper and the chipboard and then the top and get your kids to come stand on them, screw them down. And like that could take a huge part of one day, but you want to press what you've got so you can capture that color. You
It's a
don't,
big, it's a when I order my flowers in season is Thursdays is when I go pick them up at the co-op, and it's a very, very long day.
mm,
Um, I've given up because I'm just too tired, and I wake up the next day, and those flowers the next day don't press as well. They just
wow.
don't.
Wow.
It's like I have to. I know that they're not going to be as high quality. Picking your flowers as well for pressing them is a different timeline. You're not going to go out in the morning. You don't want any dew. You don't want any rain. Sometimes you miss flowers that you would have loved to press, but it's just too rainy that week. And then they're done by the time you go and press them. You need some nice dry weather. And I think that has to do with color retention too. As I said before, like another variable is when you pick them.
That's a really good point about how much moisture is in that individual petal. Holly asks, can you please talk about best practices for getting quality images, especially when on glass? Are you shooting on glass or are you only shooting when it's on paper?
I do shoot, and if you follow me on Instagram, I do take quite a few images with glass. Art glass is the lowest UV, it's the highest UV resistant and also lower glare. So if you find a framer or glass supplier and start purchasing art glass from them, you will get better images. You'll also get a better look when it's hung up, because there won't be as much reflection. There is a lot about photography and taking photos of things that have a reflection online. I've read a lot about it. I have a manual camera that I play around a lot with my f-stops and ISO and whatnot in order to capture it without so much glare.
Misty, first of all, Misty says she loves everyone's questions. When do you know when your flowers have been pressed enough?
Yes, this is the question, the internal moisture meter, you have to know. Um, there is a sound for sure. And I'll just quickly, since this is the last, these are the boxes I use to store my pressed flowers in. They are an IKEA 99-cent box here in Canada. They fit exactly, again, a sheet of paper. So, so I
You've got
store
everything kind of standardized. I love it.
standardized. I've learned that. These are my flax that I grew from a Bob's Mill flax bag of that we use for eating. And then I grew them this year in my garden and now I press them. So they're so alive. But yeah, when you have a pressed flower that is done, it is going to make a sound that you won't forget. And you can't hear, I wish I had a little microphone. The sound is almost like paper and you just know it. And if you doubt it, it's not done. That's all I'll say. Because I've tried to rush things. I'm like, oh, I think, but it's like, and again, that's the connection between your knowledge and your heart, your feeling, all these things. You know when a flower is done. And it does have a nice crisp, or at least if you doubt that your flower is done, you can still, if you make enough presses, and you get a lot of presses off of a 4x8 sheet of plywood, you can store them in a press. You don't need to store them in that box. So sometimes when I'm on the edge of knowing, I have a whole press full of flowers that I just want to cook a little bit longer. Um, yeah. Yeah, so this is a digital workbook. Today is my new revised edition that I'm including a lot of information about mounting and framing. That is one of the missing pieces of the puzzle that I had a hard time learning. It was a big learning curve for me, so I share a ton about it in this. I start from building a press to all the things I talked about today in more detail. I go into my scissor press, mounting and framing, and then I get really into the elements of design and using that from a florist perspective.
Kind
And
of
then
your composition then and how you put your pieces together.
yeah, how I go about that. And then there's a bit of a historical. My husband is an archivist, interestingly enough. I'm now the flower archivist and he's the historian.
I love
Uh,
it.
yeah, so he's put a great history of pressing in there, which I absolutely love if you want to get really into, what you're doing and where it came from.
Wonderful. I love that. This has been so inspiring. And, everyone here has the potential to take these lessons and apply them to either your floral studio, your flower farm, or your garden. If you're like me and you don't, I'm not a professional, but I have a lot of things in my garden that I could be pressing. It's just sort of taking that old-fashioned model of pressing the whole flower and rethinking it, Kate. That's what you've really shown me today. I really appreciate that. I'm just so grateful to you, Kate. People have had so many complimentary accolades for this presentation, just filled with useful information and also a lot of like encouragement. Like you're telling people do this. You're giving people permission to experiment and explore their own creativity with their flowers. So that I really appreciate.
That's wonderful. Good luck, everyone. Thank you.
Okay,
Goodbye.
but bye-bye.